My half-sister let me serve 20 months for a crash she walked away from. And my own mother told me to take it quietly. She took my husband and got pregnant. Prison changed me. The day I got out, I showed up at her baby shower. And when she saw who walked in with me, her expression changed immediately. My name is Margo Sadowski. I was 36 years old when I signed a piece of paper that said I did something I did not do, and the number that ended up mattering most was 8.5 inches. That is how far back the driver's seat had been slid from where I always set it. I am 5'2". I know exactly where my seat lives, because for 9 years I worked auto claims for Meridian Mutual out of the Canton office, and I stood in the rain next to more than 1,400 wrecked cars with a clipboard and a flashlight. I knew how to read a crash. I just never got to read my own. The night it happened was the second Saturday of September. I remember getting into a car outside a place called the Rusty Nail on Route 62. And then I remember a woman in a green hospital gown holding my wrist and asking me if I knew what year it was. Between those two things, there is nothing. Not a flash, not a sound. The doctors called it retrograde amnesia and said the memory might come back in a week, or in a year, or never. Mine never did. What I woke up to was a hospital room at Altman with the blinds half open and my mother sitting in the chair by the window with her purse still on her shoulder, like she had places to be. Her name is Corinne Lassiter. She had already talked to the trooper. Quick pause before we continue. I'm Clara, the woman behind this channel. I write these stories because I love that little moment when strangers from different places end up feeling the same thing. If this one already pulled you in, stay with me. It goes deeper from here. She had already talked to the trooper. She had already talked to my half-sister. By the time I opened my eyes, the story of my life had been written by other people, and I was just being handed the copy. There was a man in the other car, she said, 61 years old. His pelvis is broken in 2 places. I said, "Where's Ivy?" "Ivy's fine." Ivy walked away. She said it like that was a mercy I should be grateful for. "Margo, listen to me. They took your blood. You'd been drinking." I had. 2 glasses of wine over 3 hours at a bar I did not want to be at. My blood alcohol came back at 0.04, half the legal limit. That number never once appeared in any conversation my family had about me afterward. What appeared was the word drinking. And the word drinking did all the work they needed it to do. I asked her the only question that mattered. Was I driving? My mother looked at the window. Not at me. At the window. "Ivy says you were," she said. "Ivy was in the passenger seat. She got out and she pulled you onto the grass." She reached over and put her hand on the blanket near my knee, not on my knee. "Honey, take it quietly. Don't make her live through a trial. You're the older one." I want to be honest about what happened inside me in that moment because it is the part people find hardest to believe. I did not scream. I did not accuse anybody. There was a hole where my memory should have been, and my mother poured her version into it, and the hole filled right up. That is what a head injury does. It does not just take the night. It takes your standing to argue about the night. I believed her. For 20 months, I believed her. You have to understand what Ivy was to me before she was this. Ivy is my half-sister. Same mother, different fathers. She is 5 years younger, and she is 5'10", which mattered later in a way nobody at that hospital could have guessed. When she was 11, our mother was working doubles at a nursing home in Massillon, and I was 16. And I was the one who got Ivy to the orthodontist on Tuscarawas Street every 3rd Wednesday. I paid for the last 6 months of her braces out of a job at a garden center, $40 a week, and I never told our mother because our mother would have found a way to be insulted by it. When Ivy was 15, I taught her to drive. St. Bernadette's parking lot, Sunday afternoons after the last mass. The lot empty except for the light poles. I put an empty laundry detergent bottle on the asphalt and made her back around it until she stopped hitting it. I taught her to set her mirrors before she touched the key. I taught her that the seat comes first, then the mirrors, then the belt, then the engine. Seat, mirrors, belt, engine. I said it so many times she used to mouth it back at me with her eyes rolled up in her head. She would put her hand flat on my forearm when she got something right and say, "Don't tell Mom I'm good at this. She'll want the car." That is the sister I had. I need you to have her in your head, because the woman who let me go to prison was built out of that same girl. And for a long time, I could not make those two people fit in the same body. The plea happened in courtroom 4 of the Stark County Courthouse on a Tuesday morning in February. My attorney was a public defender named Ellis Farrow, who had 11 open felony files that week, and a nice way of sighing. He laid it out for me in the hallway. "The passenger identifies you as the driver, Kink," he said. "Your mother tells the state you'd been drinking that night. You have no memory of the event. You have a positive blood test, even a low one. That's a conviction. If we go to trial and lose, you're looking at the top of the range." I asked him whether anybody had downloaded the module. He said, "The what?" Here's the thing that would eat me alive later. Every modern car keeps a black box. It is called an airbag control module, and when it senses a crash, it locks in about 5 seconds of data: speed, throttle, brake, steering input, whether the driver's belt was buckled. On a lot of vehicles, the position of the driver's seat track. In my old job, on any injury claim over a certain dollar figure, that download was standard. You pull the module, you get the truth, and it does not care who is crying in the hallway. I asked a lawyer in a courthouse whether anyone had pulled the black box on the car that took 20 months of my life, and he said, "The what?" I pled to aggravated vehicular assault. 30 months with the understanding that good time would take it down. The judge asked me if I was entering the plea freely. I said yes. Behind me, I could hear my mother crying, and I remember thinking that at least she came. Ivy did not come. She sent a text that said, "I can't watch this. I'm sorry. I love you." I read that text 11 times in the holding room before they took my phone. Intake at the Ohio Reformatory for Women in Marysville takes about 6 hours. You give up everything you are wearing and everything you are carrying, and a woman with a laminated list writes it all down in ballpoint. Watch. Earrings. Silver. 2. Wedding set. Yellow gold. 1. She put my wedding ring in a manila property envelope, folded the flap, and ran a strip of tape across it. Then she wrote my inmate number on the front in black marker and dropped it in a bin with 100 other envelopes. I watched that ring go into that envelope, and that was the exact second the crying started. Not in the courtroom, not at the hospital, there, over an envelope. My husband's name is Dean Halloway. We had been married 6 years. He came to see me in March and in April and in early June. He sat on the other side of the table with his hands under it and told me about the water heater and about his mother's knee. In June, he said, "Everybody's just trying to hold it together, Margo." Then he stopped coming. The divorce papers reached me in November, forwarded through the mailroom with the corners stamped. Uncontested, irreconcilable differences. He kept the house on Bricker Street. I signed it on the metal table in the day room with a golf pencil, because they do not let you have pens with metal clips. I did not fight it. I want to be clear about the woman I was that first year. I was not building a case. I was not plotting anything. I had accepted all the way down to the floor of myself that I had gotten drunk and put a 61-year-old man in a wheelchair for 4 months, and that everything being taken from me was the correct amount to take. The job that saved me was the law library. You get assigned work at Marysville. Kitchen, grounds, laundry, custodial. I got the library because I could type 90 words a minute and because I had a college degree. And the woman who ran the inmate clerk desk was named Vernita Cobb. Vernita was 58. She had been down 11 years, and she had personally drafted more post-conviction filings than most attorneys in Union County. She wore reading glasses on a shoelace, and she did not waste words on people she had not decided about yet. For 6 weeks, she barely spoke to me. I shelved, I stamped, I learned the copier. Then one afternoon in October, she was working a case file at the far table, a traffic case, And she said, without looking up, "You did claims? Cars? 9 years. So you've seen the download, the little box." "Airbag module," I said. "Sure, on any injury file over 25,000, we imaged it. It's not optional." Vernita took her glasses off and let them hang on the shoelace and looked at me for a long moment. She has a way of looking at you where you can feel the question coming before it lands. "Sadowski," she said, "who told you that you were driving?" "My sister." "Uh-huh." She put the glasses back on. "And who pulled the download on your car?" I opened my mouth and nothing came out of it, because the answer was nobody. Nobody had. Not the state, because they had a confession-shaped plea and a positive blood test and a witness. Not my attorney, because he had 11 files that week and did not know the question existed. Not me, because I had a hole in my head where the night should be, and a mother who told me to take it quietly. There was a machine in that car that could not be talked into anything. And in 20 months, not one person in my life had thought to ask it what it saw. That night in my bunk, I did the arithmetic I had been avoiding. The wreck was 15 months back. Cars from a total loss do not sit around forever. They go to auction, they go to a rebuilder, they go to a crusher, and when they go to a crusher, the module goes with them. I had one question that could clear me, and it was sitting in a piece of plastic the size of a paperback book, somewhere in the state of Ohio, on a clock I could not see. Vernita Cobb had one rule for people who came to her with a question in their mouth and rage in their hands. "You don't write letters," she said. "You write requests." There is a difference, and it took me a while to feel it. A letter asks a person to care about you. A request obligates an office to answer you. A letter can be thrown away by a secretary having a bad morning. A request has a docket number, a fee schedule, and a clock. So I stopped writing letters. The first request went to the clerk of courts in Stark County for the complete file in state of Ohio versus Margo Sadowski. The second went to the Ohio State Highway Patrol Post that worked the crash for the full report, the scene diagram, the photographs, and the crash reconstruction if one existed. The third went to Altman Hospital for my own medical records from the night of September 9th and the 4 days after. Copies are 5 cents a page in Stark County. Certified copies are more. I had $211 in my inmate account, and I sat down at that metal table with a golf pencil and budgeted it like a woman planning a wedding on nothing. Vernita watched me address the envelopes and said one more thing. "When it comes, don't read it like it's about you. Read it like it's a stranger's file." I said I would try. The mail at Marysville comes in the afternoon. You learn to hear the cart before you see it. For 6 weeks, I heard that cart and got nothing. And then on a Thursday in December, I got something. And it was not from any clerk of courts. It was a Christmas card from my mother. Heavy cardstock, gold foil border, the kind she buys 2 boxes of at the Hallmark store in Belden Village every year. On the front, a photograph. My mother in the middle in a red sweater. Her husband on her left. Ivy on her right in a cream-colored dress. Hair down, glowing the way she has glowed since she was 15 years old. And standing behind Ivy with his hand on her shoulder, my husband. Dean's hand. Dean's wedding band hand. No band on it, resting on my sister's shoulder like it had been living there for a while. Inside, in my mother's handwriting, "Thinking of you, honey. We're all praying. Love, Mom." I did not tear it up. I want you to know that, because for a long time, I thought the fact that I did not tear it up meant something was broken in me. I sat on the edge of my bunk and I looked at that photograph for maybe 40 minutes. I looked at where Dean's fingers were. I looked at Ivy's face, and I could not find one single flinch in it. I looked at my mother, who had mailed this on purpose to a state prison, to me, and had signed it praying. Then I turned it face down on the mattress, and I did not turn it back over. That night I lay there, and I did the thing you do at 2 a.m, which is go looking through your own memory for the moment it started. And what I kept landing on was not any of the ugly parts. It was a Sunday afternoon in a church parking lot. Ivy was 15. She had her hands at 10 and 2 because I made her, and she was creeping around an empty detergent bottle at 4 miles an hour with her tongue between her teeth. Every time she got around it clean, she'd laugh. This big, unguarded honk of a laugh, and hit the brake too hard and throw us both against the belts. Seat, mirrors, belt, engine. I must have said it 200 times that fall. At the end of one of those afternoons, she put her hand flat on my forearm and said, "You're a better mom than Mom." I told her not to say things like that, but I drove home feeling like somebody had put a coat over my shoulders. That is who I was defending in the hospital when I said, "Take it quietly," and meant it. Not a woman who stole my husband. A kid in a parking lot who thought I hung the moon. The file came in January, in 2 padded envelopes, 431 pages. I did what Vernita told me. I laid it out on the far table in the law library, and I read it like it belonged to a stranger, and within 20 minutes, my hands were cold, because I had spent 9 years reading files exactly like this. And this one was thin in all the places that should have been thick. The crash report ran 4 pages. The narrative section, the part where the trooper writes what happened in his own words, was 11 sentences. And there it was, sentence 6. Driver identified by front seat passenger I. Lassiter. That is the whole thing. That is the sum total of the investigation into who was behind the wheel of a vehicle that put a man in surgery. One woman standing on the grass at 11:40 at night pointed at the other woman lying on the grass and said, "She was driving," and the state of Ohio wrote it down and never looked again. There was no reconstruction. There was no scene measurement beyond the standard diagram. There was no download. Then I got to the medical records, and I stopped breathing for a second. Emergency Department, Altman, September 9th, 11:58 p.m., trauma assessment. A resident had written, in the careful, useless handwriting of a person doing his 4th hour of a 12-hour shift, a full description of my injuries. Diagonal contusion and abrasion noted. Right clavicle across chest to left lower quadrant. Consistent with restraint. I read that sentence maybe 15 times. Here is what that means, and any adjuster in the country will tell you the same thing. A 3-point seatbelt runs over one shoulder and down across the body. If you are in the driver's seat of an American car, the belt comes off your left shoulder and crosses to your right hip. It is a mirror image on the passenger side. Right shoulder, down across, left hip. The bruise across my chest ran from my right collarbone to my left side. That is a passenger's belt. That is not a maybe. That is geometry. I sat in a prison law library with a photocopy of my own body in front of me and understood that the answer had been in the file the entire time, on page 168, and that not one human being had ever put page 168 next to page 4. I brought it to Vernita. She read it twice, slow, then set it down and pressed it flat with her palm. "That's real," she said. "That's not enough. It's a belt pattern. It's a bruise on a woman who got thrown around inside a car and then dragged onto grass by somebody with a reason to lie." She tapped the page. "A prosecutor eats that in one bite. He says the belt shifted. He says the passenger pulled you across the console. He says you weren't belted at all, and that marks from the seat frame." She looked at me over the shoelace glasses. "It's a rung, Sadowski. It ain't the ladder." "Then what's the ladder?" "You already said it," she said. "The box." So I went back into the file for the car. That is the part civilians never think about. A wrecked vehicle is not evidence to an insurance company. It is inventory. There is a paper trail on it that has nothing to do with the criminal case and everything to do with money. And money keeps better records than justice does. Page 304. The tow sheet. Vehicle removed from scene by Pruitt Towing and Salvage, Louisville, Ohio, at 12:41 a.m., stored at their yard on Nickel Plate Road. I knew what happened next because I had signed off on it 1,000 times. The carrier declares the vehicle a total loss. The carrier takes the title. The car goes to a salvage auction where it gets bought by one of 3 kinds of people. A parts yard, which strips it. a crusher, which is exactly what it sounds like, or a rebuilder, who buys it, straightens it, and puts it back on the road with a salvage title. 2 of those 3 outcomes destroy the module. One of them does not. I wrote it out for Vernita on a sheet of yellow legal paper. She read it and said the sentence that reorganized my entire life. "You can't call anybody from in here," she said. "Who do you have on the outside who owes you nothing and likes you anyway?" There was exactly one name. Brenda Ojo trained me at Meridian Mutual when I was 27 and could not back a company sedan out of a parking space without hitting a cone. She is 61, she has been an adjuster for 30 years, and she once drove to Zanesville in an ice storm to photograph a barn. When my name went in the repository under the word crash, half the office stopped answering my texts. Brenda sent me a card in county lockup that said, "I don't believe most of what I'm hearing. Tell me if you need something." I had never used it. I used it in January. I wrote her 4 paragraphs. The belt pattern, the missing download, the tow sheet, the name Pruitt. I asked her for one thing only: find out whether that car still exists. Then I gave the envelope to the mailroom and started counting days again, which is the only skill you really master in a place like that. Her answer took 11 days. It was 1 page, typed, because Brenda does not trust her own handwriting. Margo. Car exists. Sold at salvage auction to a rebuilder named Kessel, out of Alliance, who died last spring before he touched it. The unit went back to the yard against the storage bill. It has been sitting in the back row under a tarp for 14 months. I talked to the owner, Harlan Pruitt, on the phone for 20 minutes. He is a strange man, and he does not like insurance people. He also said something I need you to think about before you do anything else. He said you're not the first person to call about that car. He said somebody came out to the yard about 11 months ago, walked the back row with him, and asked him specifically what happens to the computer inside a wrecked vehicle. He said it was a woman. A tall woman. I read that line in Brenda's letter, standing up, in the middle of the day room, with the television going behind me, and I had to sit down on the arm of a plastic chair. Ivy is 5'10". Ivy has been the tallest woman in every room she has ever walked into since she was 13 years old. Somebody had driven out to a salvage yard on Nickel Plate Road 11 months earlier, walked the back row in the mud, and asked a stranger whether the computer inside a wrecked car still worked, and whether anybody could read it. An innocent person does not do that. An innocent person does not know that question exists. I had to work in insurance for 9 years to know that question exists. She had gone out there to find out whether the car could still talk. I did not sleep that night, and in the morning I did not write a letter. I wrote a request. I did it the way I would have done it at Meridian. I addressed it to Pruitt Towing and Salvage Attention Owner. I gave the last 6 of the vehicle identification number, the tow date, the tow time off the sheet, the scene location on Route 62, and the storage lot address. I asked 3 questions and numbered them. 1, is the unit still in your possession? 2, has the interior been stripped or the airbag system removed? 3, what would you need from me in order to allow a certified crash data retrieval technician to image the airbag control module in your yard? At the bottom I wrote, I understand you do not like insurance people. I used to be one. It is the only reason I know what to ask you. Vernita read it over my shoulder and grunted, which from her is a standing ovation. Harlan Pruitt wrote back on the back of a carbon copy invoice, in pencil, in block capitals. 68 years old, widower. 3rd generation on that lot, and he keeps every piece of paper that ever came through the gate because, in his words, people lie and paper don't. Here is what he told me. The car was still there, back row, north fence, under a blue poly tarp with a tire on each corner. It had been bought at the salvage auction by a rebuilder named Kessel, out of Alliance, who paid a deposit, hauled it out, and then had a heart attack in April before he ever touched it. The estate did not want it. The car came back to Pruitt against an unpaid storage bill that was, by then, larger than the car. The interior was intact. Nobody had stripped it, because a wrecked sedan with a bent unibody is worth more sitting there accruing storage than it is in pieces. And yes, he wrote, a tall girl came out here last spring, said she was family, wouldn't give a name, asked if the computer still worked. I told her it ain't my car and it ain't hers, and she left. Then, at the bottom, underlined twice, I didn't like her. I want to tell you that I felt vindicated. What I actually felt was sick, because up until that pencil, some part of me had still been holding a door open for a version of the story where Ivy was confused, or concussed herself, or panicked at 11:40 at night and then got trapped in a lie she was too scared to climb out of. A young woman making the worst decision of her life in 4 seconds. You do not drive to a salvage yard in 4 seconds. You drive there deliberately, on a Tuesday, after thinking about it. The rest of it turned into logistics. And logistics is where most people quit. You cannot just walk into a junkyard with a screwdriver and pull the black box out of a car. Not if you ever want a court to look at it. The download has to be done with a licensed crash data retrieval kit by a technician who is trained and accredited to run it, and every step has to be photographed and written down. Vehicle identification number photographed on the dash and on the door jamb. Odometer. The condition of the module and the connectors. Who touched it, when, and where it went afterward. Vernita put it plainly. Anything a man in a yard hands you in a coffee can, the state throws in the garbage. You want it done so clean that the prosecutor's own expert would have done it the same way. Then there was the ownership problem, which almost ended everything. The car did not belong to me. It had never belonged to me. It belonged, on paper, to a dead man's estate, with a storage lien sitting on top of it, and nobody could authorize anything to be done to that vehicle. And if Harlan let a stranger cut into it, he was the one exposed. Harlan solved it himself, and he solved it the way a man who has been in that business for 40 years solves things. He foreclosed his own storage lien. There is a process in Ohio for an unpaid storage bill on an abandoned unit. Affidavits, certified notice to the last titled owner and any lien holder, a waiting period, then a new title issued in the lot owner's name. It took him 45 days and cost him about $90 in filing and postage. At the end of it, Harlan Pruitt owned the car outright, and Harlan Pruitt could do whatever he wanted with it. He wrote me one line about it. I ain't doing this for you. I don't like being lied to in my own yard. Then there was money. A certified crash data retrieval technician charges for the trip, the imaging, and the report. The one Brenda found, a man named Rafael Cintron, out of Akron, accredited 16 years doing exactly this, quoted $450, plus $100 for a written report with photographs, plus he wanted the storage arrears squared so nobody could later claim the vehicle was improperly held. I had $211. So I went to work. Not the job the state gave me, the other one. In a prison law library, there is always a line of women who need something typed. Grievances, motions for judicial release, custody letters to a county caseworker, requests for medical records that keep coming back denied because the woman filed them on the wrong form. Vernita had been carrying all of it alone for years, and she started handing me the overflow. You cannot be paid in money. You get paid in stamps, in soup, in coffee, in a bar of the good soap. And you can turn stamps into commissary and commissary into what people need. And if you are careful and you do not gouge anybody and you do it for 11 months, you can turn 90 words a minute into $310. Brenda covered the rest. I wrote her an IOU on a piece of yellow legal paper, dated and signed, and mailed it to her, and she wrote back that she had put it in her file cabinet under S, and that I would be getting it back one day, whether I liked it or not. Somewhere in the middle of all that, in month 17, Brenda mentioned something at the end of a letter. The way you mention weather. I ran into your mother and Ivy at the Giant Eagle on Whipple. I don't think they saw me. Margo, I'm not going to let you hear this from a Christmas card. Ivy is pregnant. She's showing. Your mother was pushing the cart. I read that in the chow hall with the tray in front of me, and I finished the tray. I made myself finish the tray. Then I went back to my unit, and I stood at the window at the end of the range for a long time. She had my husband. She had my house on Bricker Street, the one with the water heater Dean kept talking about. She had my mother, entirely, without competition. And now she was going to have the thing I had been putting off for 2 years because Dean wanted to wait until the mortgage came down. And I was going to be 40 when I got out. The download happened on a Wednesday in March, in the rain. I was not there. I have Brenda's photographs and I have Rafa Tintron's report, and I have played that morning in my head so many times, it feels like a memory I actually own. They pulled the tarp. 14 months of weather came off it in a sheet. The front left quarter of the car was folded almost to the firewall. The windshield was a spiderweb with a hole in it. Inside, the airbags were still hanging out of the wheel, and the dash like gray laundry, stiff and dirty. Rafa photographed the vehicle identification number on the dash, then on the door jamb, then the odometer. He photographed the interior before he touched anything. He got the module out from under the center console, imaged it on the spot with the retrieval kit, and a laptop on the hood of his van under an umbrella Harlan held over him, and he printed the raw report in the van. Then he did the part that I did not ask for, and that changed everything. He measured the seats. The crash had jammed the driver's seat track. It had not moved since 11:38 p.m. on the 9th of September. Rafa put a tape on it and photographed the tape in place. The driver's seat was locked 8.5 inches rearward of its full forward position. The seat back reclined 2 clicks. The steering column tilted to its upper stop, and the lumbar support wound all the way out. The front passenger seat was locked at full forward travel, seat back nearly upright, with a folded sweatshirt still wedged between the base and the console. I am 5'2". From 8.5 inches back, with the column up, I cannot reach the brake pedal, not with my toes. I have never in my life driven a car from that position, and I could not have. And there are 12 photographs with a tape measure lying in the seat track that say so. The data itself was 4 pages, and I read the copy Brenda mailed me sitting on the floor of the library with my back against the shelf. 5 seconds before impact, 68 miles an hour in a 45. Throttle at 100%. No brake application until half a second before, and then everything at once. Hard steering input to the left. Driver seatbelt buckled. Front passenger seatbelt buckled. Both belts were buckled at impact. Both of us were strapped in where we sat, and where I sat was the right-hand seat, all the way forward, with a sweatshirt jammed under it because my legs are short, and that car was never mine. Ivy got out of the driver's seat of a car she had put into a man at 68 miles an hour, walked around the front of it, unbuckled her sister, dragged her onto the grass, and pointed at her. I did not cry. I sat on that floor and I felt something get very quiet and very organized inside me, and Vernita looked down at me over her glasses and said, "There it is." Because now I had a machine and a tape measure. What I still did not have was a human being. Every one of those pages could be argued about by somebody in a suit who would say the seats were moved by the tow, moved by the fire department, moved by 14 months of a junkyard. I knew it, and Vernita knew it. I needed a person who had been in that car. 9 days later, the cart came around, and there was an envelope with a return address in Alliance, Ohio, and a name on it I had not seen written down in 2 years. Rosalind Pike. Ivy's best friend since the 9th grade, Roz, who was at my wedding in a green dress. I opened it and the first line was 5 words long. I was in the back seat. Roz Pike's letter was 2 pages, front and back, in handwriting that got steadier as it went. She had been sober 14 months. She was living with her aunt in Alliance and working the counter at a tire and lube on State Street. Her sponsor had her doing the 9th step, which is the one where you stop apologizing in general and start making it right in particular. And her sponsor had asked her to write down every name she owed something to. She wrote that she had put my name at the top of the list in October and had not been able to write past it for 5 months. Then she told me what happened, and she told it the way people tell the truth, which is out of order and with the wrong details in it. She was in the back seat behind the driver. There were 3 of us in that car, and the third one was her. They had been at the Rusty Nail since about 8. I came at 9:30 because Ivy had called me and said she and Dean had a fight and could I just come sit with her, which is a sentence I had answered yes to about 400 times in my life. At 11:15, Ivy took the keys off the bar. Roz wrote that she remembered me putting my hand out for them and Ivy pulling them back and laughing and saying, "You've had wine, Margo." And I remember being annoyed and getting into the passenger seat and having to run the seat all the way forward because my sister had been driving my car since Thursday. I did not remember 1 second of that. I still don't. But when I read it, my body did something, some old animal flinch, and I had to put the pages down on the table. Ivy drove. Roz was behind her. Roz said Ivy was going, in her words, way too fast, and that she was mad about something Dean had said, and she was driving mad, which anybody who ever rode with her already knew was the dangerous version. And then Roz wrote the part she had been carrying. She said after the impact she came to, with her forehead bleeding and the back door already open, and she got out and she ran. Not because she did not care, because she had a suspended license and a failure to appear out of Mahoning County, and she was, in her own words, drunk out of her mind, and every instinct she had said, "Get away from the flashing lights." She made it to a marathon station on 62 and called her cousin from the payphone by the air pump. She never gave a statement. Nobody ever knew she had been in the car. She was not in the report, and because as far as the state of Ohio was concerned, she was never there. She found out I had taken the charge from a Facebook post. She wrote, "I told myself Ivy would fix it. Then I told myself, you must have made a deal that was good for you. Then I stopped telling myself anything and just drank." The last line of the letter said, "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking you what I have to do." I wanted to write back that night. 6 pages. Everything. The seat track, the belt pattern, the 68 miles an hour, the salvage yard, all of it, just to have one person on earth know what I knew. Vernita took the pen out of my hand. "Absolutely not," she said. "She's the witness." She's the witness, which is exactly why you don't put one single fact in her head. She sat down across from me. You tell her what the seat measured, and the day she's on that stand, a prosecutor asks her where she got that number, and she says, "Margo told me." And then everything you built in 20 months belongs to him instead of you. She let that sit. She came to you with it. That's the only version that survives. You don't feed a witness. You get out of her way. So I wrote 3 sentences. Roz, thank you for writing. Do not put anything else in a letter to me, and do not discuss this with Ivy, with my mother, or with Dean. Call this office and tell them everything exactly the way you remember it, including the part about running. Underneath, I wrote a phone number in Cleveland. Priya Raval was a staff attorney at a post-conviction clinic attached to a law school, 34 years old, and the least dramatic person I have ever dealt with. Brenda had gotten the crash data report in front of her in April by driving it to Cleveland herself and sitting in the lobby for 2 hours until somebody would take it. Priya's first letter to me was 4 paragraphs, and 3 of them were about why this was going to be hard. A guilty plea, she wrote, is a wall. When you stand up in open court and say yes, you did it. The law treats that as the most reliable thing that ever happened in the case. To get behind it, you file a motion to withdraw the plea to correct a manifest injustice or a petition for post-conviction relief on newly discovered evidence. And either way, you are asking a judge to say that his own courtroom got it wrong. And then she wrote the sentence that I taped inside my locker. The seat measurement is the strongest physical evidence I have seen in a case like this in 6 years. But physical evidence explains what happened. It does not explain who lied. For that, I need a person. Roz called that office on a Tuesday. She talked for 2 hours and 11 minutes. They did it properly. Priya would not take Roz's statement herself in a way that could look coached. So she found Roz her own lawyer, a woman in Canton who handled the Mahoning warrant first, because you cannot ask a terrified person to walk into a notary's office with a bench warrant hanging over her. That took 6 weeks and a $400 fine, and Brenda drove Roz to court for it. On a Thursday in June, in a law office above a dry cleaner in Alliance, Rosalind Pike signed a sworn affidavit, 7 pages, notarized, describing everything from the bar to the payphone at the Marathon station. And then she gave them the thing nobody expected, because she had never once thought of it as evidence: her old phone. A dead LG in her aunt's kitchen drawer with a cracked corner. The phone she had that year, kept because she never got around to throwing it out. At 11:19 p.m. on the 9th of September, from the backseat of my car, Roz had sent her boyfriend a message. "Ivy is driving like a maniac. I'm gonna die back here." 19 minutes before impact. They paid a shop in Akron $60 to charge it, image it, and produce a written extraction report with the timestamps intact, and Priya put the phone itself in her office safe. 3 rungs. The belt pattern on my body, the seats, and the module, and a message sent by a passenger in real time that says my sister's name and the word driving. I found out later that when Priya read the extraction report, she called Brenda and said only, "Okay, now we go." I wrote my mother 1 letter in all of that time. I did not tell her what I had. I asked her 1 question, and I asked it as plainly as I could put it. I asked her whether, on the night of September 9th, anyone had told her that I was driving other than Ivy. I asked whether she had ever, in 20 months, gone back and wondered. She wrote back on the same heavy cardstock she uses for everything. This is why I love making these stories. People think silence means weakness until the proof is already in the room. Stay with me. We're right at that point. She wrote back on the same heavy cardstock she uses for everything. "Margo, don't do this to your sister. She is having a baby. She has been through enough. Whatever you think you have figured out in there, think about what it would do to this family. You've always been the strong one. Be strong a little longer. Be strong a little longer." 20 months in, my mother's position had not moved 1 inch. It was the same position as the hospital room, in nicer handwriting. "Take it quietly. Be the older one. Let it cost you instead of her." I read that letter twice, and I put it in the folder with everything else, because Priya had told me to keep everything, and because I had stopped reading my mother's words as a daughter about 8 months earlier and started reading them as an exhibit. Priya filed in June a motion to withdraw the plea and a petition for post-conviction relief, together with the crash data retrieval report, the 12 photographs of the tape measure in the seat track, the emergency department record with the restraint contusion, Roz's affidavit, and the phone extraction. And then nothing happened, for a long time, in the specific way that only a court can make nothing happen. The prosecutor's office asked for an extension, 30 days. Then they asked for another one, because the assistant handling it had left for a firm in Columbus, and it got reassigned. Priya filed a reply. The court set a status conference, then moved it. In September, the judge's staff called with a hearing date. The hearing date was in November. My release date was the 10th of October. I want to explain what that means, because most people assume the story ends when the door opens. It does not. I was going to walk out of Marysville still convicted, still a felon, still on post-release control, meaning a supervising officer, an approved address, monthly reporting, no leaving the county without permission, and a checkbox on every job application for the rest of my life until a judge signed something. 20 months of work, and I was going to come home to the exact same last name in the exact same court file. Priya said, in her flat way, "That's normal. Courts move slowest when nobody's still in a cell. It doesn't mean we lose." I said, "It means I come home as the person who did it." "For a few more weeks," she said. "Yes." 10 days before my release, Priya called Brenda, and Brenda came to see me on a Saturday. She brought the folder and her reading glasses, and she sat down across the table and did not open the folder at all, which is how I knew something else was coming. Roz called Priya's office, Brenda said. She wanted them to tell you something, and Priya wouldn't put it in a letter. Okay. Your mother is throwing Ivy a baby shower at the house on Woodlawn, Saturday the 12th. 2 days after I got out. Brenda watched my face. She has been reading people across kitchen tables for 30 years, and she was reading me then. There's more, she said. Roz got invited? She's been invited since August. Ivy doesn't know that Roz has done any of this. I sat there with my hands flat on the table. Roz told Priya she's going either way, Brenda said, and she asked me to ask you something. Brenda finally opened the folder, but only to have something to look at. She wants to know if she can walk in with you. They release you at 8 in the morning. There is a window at the front of the building where a woman I had never seen before slid a clipboard across a counter and asked me to verify my property. She set the manila envelope down in front of me. 20 months of tape had gone yellow at the edges. My inmate number was still on the front in black marker, the ink a little softened. I signed for it. I did not open it. I put it in the paper bag with the rest of what I owned, which was a Bible I did not read, a folder 2 inches thick, and a pair of shoes. Brenda Ojo was in the lot in her gray Malibu with the engine running because it was 41 degrees. She got out and hugged me for a long time in front of everybody and did not say anything at all, which was exactly right. In the car, she said, "You want to drive?" I looked at the driver's seat and I could not make my hand reach for the door. She did not push it. She just walked around and got in, and I sat in the passenger seat and put on the belt and heard the click and felt it come down across my right shoulder and cross to my left hip, exactly the way it had on the 9th of September. And I put my hand flat over it and held it there the whole way to Canton. Brenda bought me a Coke at a gas station in Worcester, and I drank the entire thing standing next to the car in the cold. My approved address was a transitional house for women on 12th Street Northwest. $85 a week for a room with a twin bed, a dresser, a window that looked at the side of a garage, and a curfew of 10 o'clock. There were 7 of us, and 1 bathroom on the 2nd floor, and a chore wheel on the refrigerator with my name already written on it in somebody else's handwriting. Monday, I reported to my supervising officer, a man named Dwayne Pettiford, in an office with a plastic fern. He went through the conditions with a pen, checking them as he read. Monthly reporting, verified employment within 60 days, no leaving Stark County without written permission, curfew. He asked if I understood, and then he looked up from the page for the first time. I read your file, Bert, he said. There's a motion pending. There is? Then keep your nose clean and let it happen. He capped the pen. The single fastest way to lose that motion is to give somebody a reason to write a report about you. I want that on the record because of where this is going. I knew the rules. I intended to follow every one of them, and I did. On Friday, I drove out to my mother's house on Woodlawn. Brenda let me use the Malibu, and I made myself do it, and I sat in the driveway for a while with my hands on the wheel before I got out. It is a brick ranch with a carport and a concrete bird bath my grandfather poured in 1974. I grew up in that house. I have a scar on my knee from that driveway. She opened the door 6 inches with the chain on. Then she saw it was me and unhooked it and let me into the kitchen and no further. The dining room was already done for the next day. A folding table along the wall with a white cloth. A cardboard letter banner spelling something in gold. Balloons in the corner, still in bags. 2 casserole dishes on the counter covered in foil, and a stack of paper plates with little gray elephants on them. My mother stood between me and the doorway to that room the entire time. She did it without ever appearing to do it, the way she has done everything my whole life. You look thin, she said. I'm fine. Are you eating? There's chicken. Mom. She stopped. She put both hands on the back of a kitchen chair. I had a folder under my arm. I set it on her kitchen table, on the same yellow laminate table where she taught me to make pierogi at a card table when I was 9. and I opened it and turned it toward her. I need you to look at 4 pages, I said. That's all. 4. She did not look down at the table. She looked at my face. There's a report from a certified technician, I said. They pulled the computer out of the car. The driver's seat was locked 8.5 inches back from the front, with the wheel tilted all the way up. Mom, I'm 5'2". There are photographs of a tape measure lying in that seat track. And there's a hospital record from that night that describes a seatbelt bruise across my body going the wrong direction for a driver. She still did not look down. And there's a woman who was in the back seat, I said. There was a third person in that car. Her hands moved on the back of the chair. That was all. Ivy's due in 7 weeks, she said. I know. She's had a hard pregnancy. Her blood pressure. Mom, look at the pages. And my mother, who carried me on her hip and worked doubles at a nursing home in Massillon so we could stay in that house, looked me in the eye across her own kitchen and said, No. Not, I don't believe you. Not, that can't be right. Just no. A door closing on a room she had decided she was never going to enter. If I look at that, she said, then I have to know it, and I have a grandbaby coming. I closed the folder. I remember the sound of it. Don't come tomorrow, she said. Please, not tomorrow. Come Sunday and I'll make chicken and we'll talk about all of it, I promise you. Just give her tomorrow. I said, 20 months. Margo? 20 months and you couldn't give me 4 pages. I was in the driveway with the keys in my hand when Dean pulled in behind me with folding chairs in the back of his truck. He got out slowly. He has a way of standing with his weight on his back foot when he does not want to be somewhere. He had put on maybe 15 pounds, and he had a beard now. And for one horrible half-second, my body was glad to see him, which is a thing I still have not entirely forgiven myself for. Margo, he said. Hey, they said the 10th. It was the 10th. He looked at the house, then at the truck, then at the gravel. I don't know what you want me to say. I don't want you to say anything. You were drinking that night. He said it fast, like he had been keeping it loaded for 2 years. You want to be mad at everybody, but you got in a car and you'd been drinking and a man got hurt. I sat with that. I sat with that for a long time before anything happened before any of it. 0.04, I said. What? My blood alcohol was 0.04, half the limit. It's on page 9 of the file everybody in this family talked about and nobody in this family read. He blinked at me. Dean, I said, ask Ivy where the driver's seat was. What does that mean? Ask her. Tomorrow. Watch her face when you do. I got in the car and left him standing in my mother's driveway holding a folding chair. Priya Raval told me not to go. She said it on the phone Friday night in her flat, unhurried voice, and she said it twice. Nothing good happens in that room. The state's investigator has interviews scheduled for the following week. Ivy was going to be contacted on Tuesday by a man with a badge and a recorder, and there was no version of me walking into a baby shower that improved a single line of the November hearing. I hear you, I said. That is not the same as agreeing with me. No, I said, it isn't. Here is why I went, and I have thought about it for a long time since. Not to scream. I had already decided there would be no screaming, no phone, no recording, nothing thrown, nothing broken. And I did not break that rule by one word. I went because on Tuesday, this stopped being mine. On Tuesday, it belonged to an investigator, a prosecutor, a judge, and a hearing date, and every human being in that family was going to learn what I knew from a stranger with a business card. My mother would find out from a subpoena. Dean would find out from a phone call at work. I had spent 20 months being told about my own life by other people. I was not going to hand this to a process server. I was going to put it in their hands myself, once, in person, and then I was going to leave. And because Roz asked, I made 3 copies Friday night at a print shop on Cleveland Avenue for $11.40. Each one had 5 pages. The cover sheet of Raphael Tintron's crash data retrieval report, the photograph of the tape measure lying in the driver's seat track, the emergency department note with the restraint contusion, the first page of Rosalind Pike's sworn affidavit, and the phone extraction page with the timestamp on it. I put each set in a manila envelope. On the front of each one, I wrote a name in marker. Dean, Mom, Ivy. The paper felt exactly like the envelope my wedding ring had been living in. And I noticed that at the copy shop counter. And I had to stand there for a second. Saturday was cold and bright. The shower started at 1. I picked Roz up at 12:20 in front of the Tire and Lube on State Street in Alliance. She came out and got in, and she was wearing a green dress. She wore green to my wedding. She stood 11 feet from me in a green dress in a church on Market Avenue, and she cried when Dean said his part, and 8 years later, she got in a gray Malibu in a green dress with her hands shaking in her lap. I threw up twice, she said. Okay, I'm going in either way. I'd rather not do it alone. We drove out Woodlawn, and there were 11 cars along both sides of the street and 2 more in the grass. Pink and white balloons on the mailbox post. Through the big front window, you could see women standing with plastic cups and a paper banner across the curtain rod, and my mother moving through them with a tray. I parked across the street. I put the 3 envelopes on my lap and squared the edges. What do we do? Roz said. We knock, I said. That's it. We knock, we go in. I hand out 3 envelopes, and we leave. No yelling. Not one raised voice. If anybody puts a hand on either of us, we walk straight out the door. Say it back to me. She said it back to me. We crossed the street. The storm door had a wreath on it with a stuffed rabbit wired to the middle. And standing there on my mother's concrete step, with my hand on the door handle and my sister's laugh coming through the glass, the thing that came into my head was a church parking lot on a Sunday afternoon in October, and a 15-year-old girl mouthing 4 words back at me with her eyes rolled up. Seat, mirrors, belt, engine. I pulled the door open. The noise in that house dropped in stages. The women near the door saw me first and went quiet. Then the middle of the room. Then the far corner by the sliding door, where my mother was standing with a tray of pinwheel sandwiches, and she turned around and the tray came down against her hip. There were about 30 people in there. My Aunt Jo, 2 of my cousins, women from my mother's church, a folding table stacked with gift bags in pastel tissue paper, a game half finished on a clipboard, and in the chair they had set up in front of the window, in a cream-colored dress with a pillow behind her back, my half-sister. Ivy did not look afraid. That is the part people never believe. She looked annoyed, and then she took control of the room, because that is what Ivy does, and has always done. She put her hand on her stomach and made her voice big enough to reach the kitchen. Okay, everybody, it's fine. A little laugh at the end of it. Margo just got out on Thursday, and she's not really supposed to be around alcohol, so... She looked at me with something almost like tenderness on her face, for the audience. Honey, this isn't the day. I'll call you tomorrow, I promise. 30 faces turned to me to see what the woman fresh out of prison was going to do. I did not do anything. I stepped to the side, and Roz Pike walked in behind me in her green dress. I have replayed the next 2 seconds probably 1,000 times. Ivy's mouth stayed exactly where it was. Her eyes did the whole thing. They went from Roz's face to my face and back to Roz's face, and something behind them dropped, the way a garage door drops when the spring goes. Her hand came off her stomach and went to the arm of the chair, and the plastic cup that was balanced on the arm of the chair tipped over and went down the side of the cushion, and she did not reach for it. Nobody in that room reached for it. She said, Roz. Roz said, Hey, Ivy. 2 words apiece, and every woman in that living room understood that something enormous was happening, and none of them knew what. I walked to the folding table, and I set the 3 manila envelopes down on the white cloth next to the gift bags. Then I picked the first one up. Dean. He was in the doorway to the kitchen with a bottle of pop in his hand. I held it out, and he came and took it, because when somebody hands you something, you take it. That is just how bodies work. Mom, my mother did not move. So I walked the 8 feet to her and put it in her hands and closed her fingers over it, and she let me. Then I picked up the third one and I did not walk it over. I set it on the arm of Ivy's chair on the dry side, and I stepped back. I want to be very clear about my voice. I did not raise it once. I have thought about that a lot because a part of me wanted to take that room apart with my hands, and I have never been so glad about anything I did not do. There are 5 pages in each of those, I said. You don't have to take my word for anything. Every page has a name and a license number on it. Aunt Jo said, Margo, honey, what is this? On March 11th, a certified technician downloaded the airbag module out of the car from the wreck, I said. It's been sitting in a salvage yard in Louisville for 2 years. The driver's seat was locked 8.5 inches back from full forward, with the steering column tilted all the way up and the lumbar wound all the way out. There are 12 photographs of a tape measure lying in that seat track. The passenger seat was all the way forward with a sweatshirt jammed under it. Somebody said, "Oh my God," very quietly, near the couch. I am 5'2", I said. I cannot reach the brake pedal from 8.5 inches back. Nobody my size can. I looked at my mother. The hospital wrote down my seatbelt bruise that night. Right collarbone, across my chest, down to my left hip. That's a passenger belt. A driver's belt runs the other way. It was on page 168 of a file that sat in this family for 20 months and nobody opened. Then I looked at Ivy for the first time since I came through the door. And at 11:19 that night, 19 minutes before we hit that man, somebody in the back seat of my car sent a text message that says your name and the word driving. The phone still exists. It's in a safe in Cleveland. Ivy's chin came up. She has a thing she does where she gets very calm and very reasonable, and it has worked on our mother for 31 years. That car was crushed, she said. The room did not catch it. I did. Nobody said anything about the car being crushed or not crushed, I said. Ivy, how would you know what happened to that car? She did not answer, because 11 months earlier, she had stood in the mud in the back row of Pruitt Towing and Salvage in Louisville, Ohio, and asked a 68-year-old man whether the computer inside a wrecked car still worked. And he had told her it was not her car, and she had driven home and decided she was safe. 30 women heard her say that sentence. 4 of them repeated it to an investigator 11 days later, unprompted, without ever having talked to me. I picked up my keys. There's a hearing in Stark County on November 19th, I said. The state's investigator is calling people on Tuesday. I didn't want any of you to hear it from a stranger with a badge, so now you've heard it from me. My mother said my name, just my name. I stopped at the door and I turned around, and here is the only thing I said to her, and I said it flat, without any heat in it at all. Sunday's off. Then Roz and I walked out through the storm door with the rabbit wired to the wreath, down the driveway, past the concrete bird bath my grandfather poured in 1974, and across the street to Brenda's Malibu. Roz got in and shut the door and put both hands over her face and cried like a child for about 4 minutes, and I let her. Behind us, in the front window, 30 women were standing up. Dean followed us out. He got to the car before I pulled away, and he had the envelope open in his hand and his thumb on the photograph of the tape measure, and his face had come apart. He said, "Margo." I rolled the window up. Here is what happened after, in order, because the order matters. The investigator interviewed Ivy on Tuesday, the 15th of October, at the house on Bricker Street. She kept to her story for about 40 minutes. Then he read her the 4 sentences from the shower and asked her the same question I had asked her in front of 30 people, and she stopped talking and asked for a lawyer. On the 19th of November, I sat in courtroom 4 of the Stark County Courthouse in the second row in a blue sweater Brenda bought me. The state did not oppose the motion. The plea was withdrawn. The conviction was vacated. The charges were dismissed with prejudice, and the judge, who was the same judge, said a few sentences from the bench about how the system had failed me and that he was sorry. I had spent 2 years imagining that room and how enormous it would feel. It took 11 minutes. It felt small. Ivy was indicted in January, 9 days after my nephew was born. Aggravated vehicular assault, operating under the influence, falsification, obstructing justice. Her attorney got it continued twice. In April, she pled to 3 of the 4, and in June, she reported to the same reception center I had gone through on a 4-year sentence. I did not go to the sentencing. I read the entry online on a Tuesday in a break room, and then I finished my shift. The baby is with Dean. He called me twice that spring. The second time, he said he had made the worst mistake of his life and asked if there was any version where we talked about it, and I told him no. And I have not changed my mind, and I am not going to. My mother told the investigator she did not remember telling me anything at the hospital. She was not charged with anything. There was never going to be a charge for what my mother did, because what my mother did is not illegal. It is just permanent. She calls on my birthday. I do not pick up. Last year, she left a message that said she had been thinking about the pierogi table, and I sat in my truck in a parking lot and listened to it twice and deleted it. That is where that is, and it may be where it stays. In July, on Priya's filing, the Court of Common Pleas declared me a wrongfully imprisoned individual under Ohio law. The claim itself went to the Court of Claims after that, and those things move about as fast as you would expect. The statute pays a set amount for each year a person was held, plus lost wages and the attorney fees. The first thing I did with the first check was drive to Brenda Ojo's house on a Sunday and hand her $480 and ask for my yellow legal paperback. She had it in the file cabinet under S, exactly like she said. She tried not to take the money. I told her that if she did not take it, I would mail it, and she took it. I went to see Errol Wentz in August, at his daughter's house in Louisville, about 1.5 miles from the salvage yard. He is 64 now, and he walks with a cane, and he will always walk with a cane. He knew who I was before I got to the porch. He said, "They told me it was you." I said, "I know, they told me that too." He looked at me for a while. Then he put his hand out, and I shook it. And we sat on that porch for about 20 minutes and talked about absolutely nothing. And when I left, he said, "Don't come back out of guilt. Come back if you want to." I went back in October. I have been going about every other month since. I work for Harlan Pruitt now. That is the part that still makes me laugh. He wrote me one line after the hearing. "If you need work, I need somebody who can read a title." I started in the office, running lean paperwork for $9 an hour and a space heater. Rafael Chintron trained me on the retrieval equipment on Saturdays for 8 months and would not take $1 for it. I sat the course in Michigan, I did the supervised downloads, and in the spring, I got the card in the mail with my name on it, Certified Crash Data Retrieval Technician. I stood in the driveway of a house on 12th Street Northwest, holding a piece of plastic and shaking. That night, I opened the manila envelope. 2 years and 7 months it had been sealed. First in a bin at Marysville, and then in the bottom drawer of a dresser I did not own. The tape came off in one piece. My wedding set was inside, in the little paper sleeve with my inmate number on the outside in black marker. I did not put it on, and I did not throw it in a river. I took it to a jeweler on Cleveland Avenue and sold it for $1,850. And I put every cent of it toward the crash data retrieval kit I now own outright. The hard case, the laptop, the cable set, the whole thing. The empty envelope lives flattened inside the lid of that case. I see it every time I open it. That is on purpose. Last Tuesday, it rained all morning. I drove out to the back row at Pruitt's with the case on the passenger seat, and I pulled the tarp off a silver sedan for a woman in Barberton whose insurance company has been telling her for 5 months that her son was speeding. I put the laptop on the hood. Harlan held the umbrella, because that is apparently his job now. 11 minutes. 11 minutes to take 5 seconds of the truth out of a piece of plastic the size of a paperback book and hand it to somebody nobody was listening to. It took mine 20 months, and a tape measure, and a woman in a green dress who finally told it. The magnetic sign on the door of my van says, M. Sadowski. Crash Data Retrieval, Canton, Ohio. I put it on myself, crooked, and then I peeled it off and did it again straight, because it is mine and it is going to be right. I'm Clara, and this is my channel. I love making these stories and sharing them with people across the world. If this one found you at the right time, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.